Leeds United have faced off against Sunderland, and it didn't quite work out for us. We ended up losing 1-0, and I think there were a lot of different aspects that can be explored. We can explore how Sunderland desperately tried for a game of football to not happen. We can explore the refereeing again. But in this particular video, I'm going to have a specific deep dive into the tactics and how we got it wrong and made sure that even though we had a couple of little chances, we should have had significantly more. I'm going to dive into a little bit of that in this video, maybe do a stream later covering the other bits. I don't know, we'll find out. So, to start with, we need to talk about what our tactics were at the start of the match. And we started out with the 5-3-1-1 kind of shape that in reality, when we have the ball, is more of a 4-3-3. Because when we got the ball, you've got Bogle who pushes up into the right wing, James Justin to right back, then hopping over to the left-hand side, you've got Brendan Aronson, which means that you've got effectively a winger on each side behind Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Without the ball, more of a 5-3-1-1, 3 centre-backs, 2 wing-backs, 3 defensive central midfielders, then Aronson, Calvert-Lewin. Which, on the face of it, isn't too dreadful against teams that are going to attack against us, but then it comes to the other way round, and against sides like a Sunderland, who you know are going to try and play defensively against us, you know they're not necessarily going to try and win, that's where you get a little bit more of a problem and where you need to be a little bit more creative and where ultimately I think we failed. We held a hell of a lot of ball yesterday, but whilst we held a lot of possession, we didn't really do much with it, and I think that's because we didn't have much of a creative presence in there. Sure, we had a few decent opportunities. We had a couple of times where our press would win the ball ridiculously high up and we wouldn't quite turn it into the shot that we needed to. But the fact that we were overly reliant on those high turnovers and we weren't able to create many opportunities from open play is ultimately an issue with the tactics. I think if we approach this starting out just straight out going, yeah, okay, one of those more defensive midfielders will swap out for a winger, and that means that we can be a lot more aggressive and we can perhaps put Brendan Aronson in the middle rather than playing on the left wing, and that means we got a lot more creativity going on, would have absolutely changed the game in my opinion. In my view, that would have meant that we keep their midfield a little bit more busy, a little bit more having to think about what they're doing, as opposed to we'll just drop into a bank of 5, a bank of 4, and then a centre forward, which is what we saw against Sunderland for the majority of the match. And as the game went on, we did make a couple of changes. Fair enough, some things were adjusted, but when you have a look at the players that we did change, when Mecha came on, he didn't really do too much. I got the idea, bring Metro on for Gruev, and then it's more of a 5-2-1-2 kind of thing. You've got Calvert-Lewin not so isolated, which I think was the main issue throughout the majority of the match. When Calvert-Lewin got the ball, he did what he could, but he got the ball fairly rarely because there were fairly few people around him. Metro came on, did less than you'd typically want him to do, which is a little bit of a shame, but he did his best, which is all we can ask of him. When it came to Dan James. I keep doing Jan Dames. When it came to Dan James coming on, he wasn't particularly effective, but he had the work rate that we want from him. But then again, it was a case of he picks the ball up on the right wing and no one's coming to be an option for him outside of just putting a ball into the box. And when you're just putting a ball into the box again and again and again and again and again, a half-decent defence will just nod that out time and time again, and that'll mean that you don't get the goals that you need to get. So I think we didn't really provide him with enough options either, because by the time that that's happened, we've taken off Bogle, and you're not really building around your winger. It's just winger, everyone in the middle. And then you've got Nonto on the other side waiting for the ball to bubble out, and then he can be the one that's in that exact same situation. When it came to Nonto, I think he was fairly productive. I think he had a decent match. There were a couple of points where I think he made the wrong decision, but a lot of that will come down to rust and will come down to the fact that he's not really played in a good while, and I understand him not being at the best of his game. Biol, when he came on, was genuinely a good threat. I think Biol probably is going to be better off starting for us at some point soon, because he gives us a little bit more of a threat at set pieces. He meant that those corners were a little bit more dangerous with. We tend to miss him when he's not on the pitch, but then again we can get into set pieces, and why we for some reason didn't get a penalty kick in spite of the fact that Pascal Struijk was running free. Luke O'Nien puts both of his hands around his neck and pulls him to the ground. VAR doesn't spot that one for some reason, but you never know, having Beale on the pitch potentially helps with that as well. And then we get to the depressing one. Whilst there is clearly something wrong with Buonanotte, whilst the Buonanotte thing is an issue that is not going to get solved, because he seems to be a little bit on the chunky side, carrying a little bit of weight, he doesn't seem to be impressing in training because he's not even making the matchday squad. I think surely he's got to make the squad ahead of Piru at this point, because Piru is sluggish. Piru's entire thing was when he gets a moment in the box and he has the opportunity to take a shot, he will drill it into a corner. Even now, he's not managing that anymore. You're getting the question as to what the point of Joel Piru is, and I can see why we probably wanted rid of him in January, because he's not really doing anything at this point. So, what's the point of him being around? Is the nicest way that I can possibly put that. But even missing out the subs, there's a further issue of the system change was too slow anyway. Because by that point, we were already chasing a game. We already need to play against a side that is a bank of 5, a bank of 4, and then a centre forward. Because at that point, they've scored a penalty. Which, sure, that was a penalty, but so was ours, so fuck them. But if we make the changes sooner, then we create more chances sooner, then we potentially score sooner, and if we are able to do that, then them potentially having a penalty likely doesn't happen. It gets butterfly affected out of existence. Making those changes sooner puts us in that nice little spot. Scoring early means that we don't need to do this. We don't need to desperately play against that really, really low block. So for me, a significant part of that fault probably does lie with Daniel Farke not being adaptable enough. In recent months, he's proven himself an apt Premier League manager, but it's about continuing to prove that and continuing to prove that adaptation. And it's not just, well, we've gone from a 4-3-3 to a 5 at the back. Okay, adapt on the 5 at the back when it's needed, and then it'll be all good and fine. For me, we could do with better against Norwich. If we are able to see something better against Norwich, then you go, cool. We are able to change things when we need to change things. Absolutely wonderful. But if that doesn't happen, then I think the concern starts to sneak in again. There's a little bit more that we could do. And if we don't do it, then it gets a little bit like, ooh, let's maybe fix things again. I did see a tweet earlier as well that was like, Leeds should have done more in the window to get some attacking oomph. And it's like, well, it doesn't help that Facundo Buonanotte has been the most busted of flushes that you've ever seen. But it's fine. It'll do. Whatever. Anyway. Hope you all enjoyed the video more than the match that, let's be honest, wasn't really a football match, but I'll get into that in a stream a little bit later. Hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you later. Toodaloo, amigos. Fucking annoying game. Annoying.